Sage Steele continues her revenge tour, going on these podcasts and exposing the woke cult, exposing the woke media for all of their lies. We saw Sage Steele go on Bill Maher's podcast and destroy the woke mob over there. Now Sage Steele is over on Patrick Bet-David's podcast on the Valuetainment channel, talking about, ESPN, woke media in general, the censorship that happens and the sellouts inside of woke media that are absolutely destroying media, and they're selling out for, to peddle lies, to peddle propaganda. Stations like, or shows like The View with Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar in them. Stations like ESPN, shows like ESPN, whatever you want to call it. Sage Steele exposes them all. ESPN, Disney, The View, all of them. Let's check out this clip here from the Patrick Bet-David podcast over on the Valuetainment channel with Sage Steele exposing the woke media for lying for money.
16 years when you're at an organization. Yeah, that's what you're there. You are ESPN. You're part of ESPN. How much of working at ESPN behind closed doors did you guys speak? Because some of the people, I'm like, I used to watch Broussard a lot. He's not there anymore. I used to watch this guy a lot. What happened to those guys? Is there something that happens that if you're politically different than what they believe in, is there opportunity simply because of what you favor and what you don't? And those groups who are maybe on the conservative side, do some of the people say, well, look, Sage, you and I, we're not on the same page, but I got to pay the bills. My kids are going to this, and I got to make this money, and da-da-da. There's no way in the world I can say anything right now. But I'm with you. But please don't tell anybody that I told you that. Does that happen at ESPN as well, the same way it happens in Hollywood?
There's a lot of whispering.
There is.
A lot of whispering and like texts, and you can't say it out loud. And now, listen, if you're on the other side, you can't sit in the makeup room without hearing it from the other talent, for sure, who are empowered to go off on it and to rip on Republicans or conservatives. And
you notice that, right? Like nowadays, if you watch ESPN or any Disney station that covers news, it's supposed to be certain, in certain niches. Like ESPN is obviously supposed to cover sports, right? And there's certain people on ESPN, like you can't watch a day of ESPN. You can't watch an hour of ESPN without hearing some kind of propaganda, without hearing some kind of politics. But it's only from one side ever. And if there's ever any sort of pushback from the other side that we should probably stop pushing this propaganda because it's nonsense, it's misinformation, if there's ever pushback from someone who is not on the woke side of things, they get shut down immediately and possibly even fired, like Sage Steele was. And Sage Steele also went on Bill Maher's podcast and exposed this about not just ESPN, but also The View, who was also under Disney's umbrella, and stating that whenever Sage Steele was on The View, every single time that she or anyone else tried to bring up a topic that slightly disagreed with Whoopi Goldberg or anyone else who's on the woke side of things over on The View, all they did was talk over her and put on the applause light so that the audience cheered, and then they went to commercial. Every single time she was making a good point that contradicted all of their points, all of their misinformation, all their woke nonsense. And it's the same thing goes for all of these shows, man. And all of them also claim at the same time that they value freedom of speech, that they value having conversations with people who disagree with them. All of them say this, and none of them practice it. And Sage Steele's about to go in on them right here.
Most of the people who I know felt differently, and maybe more in the middle, center, right, just would stay quiet. And then it got to the point where, like, around me, people wouldn't say anything. Are there people who are in favor because of their politics and their leanings? I think absolutely. If I had stayed quiet, I'd still be rolling. My contract still wouldn't have been up by now. But again, you have to ask yourself at what cost. I did have a couple of people, certainly. I already knew who they were, right? And they would text me, I love you. I wish I could right now. I wish I could. And I get it. But I'm also kind of blown away because they're all men. I'm like, hey, boys, where are you?
Yeah.
How am I the only one out here? And by the way, you got NFL money. Like, all those guys have a lot more money than I will ever have from having played for years and years, and NBA guys too. So that's where I find it interesting. And maybe, like, most importantly right now for one of the today's hot topic is like the transgender sports issue. And these men that I work with have daughters who are very competitive and good athletes. And I know damn well that if their daughters had to oppose a boy on the other side of the volleyball net or the basketball court, that's not happening. Like, they'd go down there and make a scene. So to be quiet about it, it's not even about, race, which is sensitive, or COVID or the vaccine. This is black and white with science. I mean, since the beginning of time, we know the difference between.
And I can somewhat understand the viewpoint. Let me know in the comments. Maybe you can't understand, and maybe this is absolutely ridiculous coming out of my mouth, but I can somewhat understand the viewpoint of an NBA player. Like, unless you're Kyrie Irving and you're like top tier, like you're an all-star, you're one of the best point guards of all time. But even Kyrie Irving couldn't play for a while. He couldn't get paid for a while, because he stood out against the jab and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure he even had to apologize for certain things that he said. If you're an NBA player, you're not top tier, and you're making millions of dollars a year, it's kind of understandable for you to stay quiet and not ruin your career over this. Because from a lot of point of views, including mine, I'm very black-pilled in a lot of different issues. It's kind of like an unwinnable war at this point. Like, our government and our leaders and the people who are overseeing how the country operates and how the Western world operates in general, how the entire planet operates, are so corrupt now, it almost seems like an unwinnable war. It almost seems pointless to throw away your career, throw away millions of dollars in order to speak the truth on things that most people already know to be true in your mind. And the people who think it's not true are already very brainwashed into thinking they're a certain way, and so much so that they're probably never going to change their mind anyway. So is it really worth it to go out there and speak the truth, lose out on these millions of dollars, when you could just continue to make these millions of dollars and then maybe speak out when you're done, when you retire? Me, personally, I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut. I wouldn't be able to do it. Personally, I would have to speak up. Hence why I have this YouTube channel. I would have to speak up. But I can also see the viewpoint of like, is it worth it? Like, is it even a winnable war? I don't know.
Men and women and the different strengths that men have, and all these men are staying silent. So I am disappointed, but I get it. There is a legitimate reason to fear speaking up. It's very personal, but I will say it is pretty lonely. Now, this isn't a woe is me, because I don't care anymore. It just took years to get there, and years of feeling like I couldn't be myself. And if only I thought like this, I would be celebrated. Like, I was the highest paid woman at that network. Like, I would have kept going forever. Hopefully, I'll shut up after this. When I started there, you guys, my kids were 11 months, 2 and 4.
If you enjoy content like this, then make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. It really does help me out a ton. Let's get back to the video.
My youngest daughter turns 18 on Saturday, 18, 20, and 22. So that's all they've known. That's all I've known. And that was my dream since I was a kid. So I didn't get off on like, oh, let me go blow somebody up and blow up a company. It was devastating, yet it was the right thing for me based on all the years where I was forced to adapt to what someone else wanted.
Well, those men... Tom. Sorry, go ahead.
Some people have enough of a platform to say something. And right on the vax thing, Pat McAfee was unafraid to have Aaron Rodgers on his podcast, which came over to ESPN, knowing that Pat is unafraid to speak from his platform. And yet, they even came down to stifle him, but Pat wasn't having it. He was very critical. He kind of went along with the 1 day or 2 day suspension, whatever it was, on Aaron Rodgers. But then he named names. Then he said, yes, Norby is the guy. Norby is the guy acting from corporate. And said, there's a guy from corporate down here, and it's Norby, and he is trying to manipulate.
You want to play the clip? That's a very good transition. Go ahead, Rob.
More people are watching the show than ever before. We're very thankful for the ESPN folks being...
Also, on the Pat McAfee front, it was absolutely hilarious because they said that Aaron Rodgers couldn't go on the show for the rest of the NFL season or whatever. I think Pat McAfee might have skipped 1 day, and then he went to address it the day after. And then they had Aaron Rodgers back on the show again, like just straight up giving the middle finger to the woke media, giving the middle finger to ESPN, saying, no, I mean, we signed here, with the agreement of we'd be able to do basically whatever we want. And if you're going to try to stop me from doing that, well, I'm just going to give you the middle finger and do it anyway.
Very hospitable. Now, there are some people actively trying to sabotage us from within ESPN. Funny. More specifically, I believe Norby Williamson is the guy who is attempting to sabotage our program.
Look at
I'm not
AJ's
100%
face.
sure.
Yeah, he doesn't know what's on
That is
the
just
phone.
seemingly the only human that has information, and then somehow that information gets leaked, and it's wrong, and then it sets a narrative of what our show is, and then are we just going to combat that from a rat every single time? I don't know. But like somebody tried to get ahead of our actual ratings release with wrong numbers 12 hours beforehand. That's a sabotage attempt. And it's been happening basically this entire season from some people who didn't necessarily love the old edition of the Pat McAfee show to the ESPN family.
Sure. You can pause it
There's a
right
lot
there.
of
So
those.
do you agree with them?
Yes.
Did you have similar experience with Norby?
I've known Norby from day one, and he just left last week after 40 years
Really?
of company. I believe that was that was kind of the final nail in the coffin.
There's probably going to be a huge changing of the guard at all Disney and all woke media now, because, you know, whenever you have people like Pat McAfee who are getting hired by ESPN after Pat McAfee's brand not being ESPN friendly at all before or after being hired by ESPN, now people like Pat McAfee are having their own platforms on YouTube and on other, you know, social media platforms that they don't need big media outlets. They can make a ton of money. I mean, Pat McAfee was averaging like 100K or 80K concurrent viewers on YouTube every single day, every single morning show that he was doing. You don't need ESPN. It's a big check, you know, and the only way that Pat McAfee would accept that check, or people like Patrick Bet-David or anyone who's like a solo creator who's bringing in these large numbers, is if you say, okay, we'll do the show under your banner, under the ESPN banner, for a big check, you know, a few $100 million or whatever. Only if we can do the same exact show that we've always done and not change at all for your corporate woke BS. And that's what Pat McAfee did, and he stuck to it. He didn't allow ESPN or the woke media to try to, you know, stifle exactly what it is that he's been doing for the last few years.
For Norby, when Pat McAfee went on and said that, now there's a couple of things. Number one, I texted with Pat that day. I was like, you go. And because he was speaking for a lot of people, made me sad because I knew Norby as a person. And I knew that his heart was very different from some of the decisions that he made. But I'll also say this, as much as I absolutely agree with a lot of the things Pat said as far as just behind the scenes. I don't know that Norby was the one, you know, influencing numbers or being untruthful about. I don't know. What I do know is that even though all of us agree with Pat, I thought it was fascinating that when have you ever seen an employee in our industry go on the air and name names, and not just
because, like I said, we don't need them anymore. Like Pat McAfee, he doesn't need ESPN. It's not like a Sage Steele situation where Sage Steele was working for ESPN and that was her only paycheck was coming from ESPN. If ESPN fires Pat McAfee tomorrow, he won't miss out on a thing. He already got his check. He already got a big lump sum of money. He's good now. He's chilling. And he can go and make as much or more from his own personal YouTube channel. Anyway, let me know what you guys are thinking about Sage Steele going on Patrick Bet-David's podcast and absolutely destroying the woke media and exposing them for their lies. And you know, the fact that they lie and censor people for the, you know, just for profit and for the purpose of further spreading that propaganda that they always love to spread. Let me know what you're thinking about the whole thing in the comments. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and hope to see you guys on the next one.